country, for Samaria was already under the Romans. And it was absolutely necessary for those that go quickly to Jerusalem to pass through that country. For in that road, you may, in 3 days' time, go from Galilee to Jerusalem. So here's Josephus, a well-educated Jew, a Pharisee, who is saying, you know what? My friends go through Samaria. And in fact, he's saying it's absolutely necessary for those going from Galilee to Jerusalem, that they should go through Samaria. In fact, he also said that now there arose a quarrel between the Samaritans and the Jews on the occasion following. It was the custom of the Galileans, when they came to the holy city at the festivals, to take their journey through the country of the Samaritans. So people who are in Galilee and they're going to Jerusalem for the holy city for the festivals. So what population would that be? That would be Galilean Jews. It was their custom to go through Samaria. So that's the white path. But surely the real Jews, other than Josephus, wouldn't say such a thing, would they? And in fact, in the Talmud, it says that Rabbi Shimon ben Eliezer went to a certain town inhabited by Samaritans. So turns out the Jewish people do travel through Samaria at the time. Josephus is like, yeah, that's absolutely the best route. And in fact, it's the custom for people traveling from one place to another to go straight through Samaria. So where we land on this is it's not crazy in any way, shape, or form that Jesus found himself in Samaria going from Jerusalem to Galilee. It was the custom. And so what people do with this is they look at this, he had to pass through Samaria, and they say, oh, so he had this divine need to go through Samaria so that he could meet the woman at the well, because if it were any other situation, he obviously would have taken the red route. But Josephus says that those going from one place to the other have to go through Samaria. So I think he just had to go through Samaria, and we don't have to worry about that one too terribly much. But I want to lay out sort of systematically what the issue was with Jews and Samaritans at the time, because there was a whole heck of a lot, like absolutely valid, that they did not care for one another. And you start with the history of Shechem. So looking back at our map, Shechem is going to be right here in between the two mounts, right by Mount Gerizim. And in our story where we're at Sychar, one of the most likely places for Sychar to be is right about where Shechem is. In fact, they may be the same place. Scholars argue about that a little bit, but they're arguing about hundreds of feet of difference. They're not arguing about many miles of difference. So we're right here by Shechem in Samaria. And so, okay, what is our history of Shechem? Shechem was the man who raped Dinah, which then led to which then led to Simeon and Levi tricking all the people there and then going in and slaughtering them wholesale. In so doing, all those people were wiped out. So we're talking about different people. However, the story stuck. And it's one of those things where when you don't like a group of people, even though they're clearly different people than the ones that got slaughtered, they're in the same place. So they're basically the same people. We don't like those folks. They're the sorts that we like to have them circumcise themselves, and then we go in and slaughter. But there are real reasons why there's some hostility. So Samaritans were a mixed race. So Assyria came in and conquered. took all the Jews of any import that they saw and exported them, and then took all the Gentiles that were of little import to them, and they exported them back to where they came from. And then there was this mixing of races, these undesirable Gentiles together with the undesirable Jews, and that's what we've got as Samaritans. Okay, so clearly, we Jews, we are pure. Those Samaritans, they're defiled, they're mixed. We don't mix anything. However, the Samaritans had the audacity to claim that they were the true heirs of Abraham's promises. And so they said, you know what, we absolutely trace ourselves back up to Manasseh and to Ephraim. And so we're part of the tribes of Israel. And they had this thing where they only believed the Pentateuch, and they didn't much care for the Jewish Pentateuch because it didn't back up what claims they were making. And so they had their own version of the Pentateuch. They sort of took the Mormon route of saying, you know what, the Jewish Pentateuch, that's been corrupted. We have the only pure Pentateuch. And it had some very strategic replacements in it. For example, in the Bible that we know, we've got, so it shall be when you cross the Jordan, you shall set up on Mount Ebal these stones that I am commanding you today, and then create this altar in a very specific way and sacrifice peace offerings. And the Samaritan Pentateuch has exactly the same thing. It just substitutes in Gerizim instead of Mount Ebal. And so they place themselves at the heart of everything. Why the animosity? Okay, well, also the Samaritans copied the temple in Jerusalem in its entirety on Mount Gerizim. So they had their own temple in all its fullness right there on Mount Gerizim, and they had a completely parallel priesthood, which was fine because we trace ourselves up to the sons of Israel, and so it's totally fine. And people should actually come to the real temple that's here in Gerizim to make their sacrifices. We don't know why people are going off to Jerusalem. Clearly the Pentateuch says that the temple needs to be here in Gerizim. So much so that when you compare the two versions, in the Bible that we know, we end up with this last commandment being, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male servant or his female servant or his ox or his donkey or anything that belongs to your neighbor. And then we get to all the people perceived thunder and lightning and flashes, and it was very scary. The Samaritan Bible has exactly the same thing. They just insert a tremendous amount of text between those to add one more commandment. And that one more commandment is build this altar on Mount Gerizim. It is the holy place where you are going to make peace offerings. And so not only is the appropriate place for the temple, it really needs to be on Mount Gerizim, but that's actually a commandment from God that they need to build that at the same level as thou shalt not kill. So these folks are not seeing eye to eye. But it gets worse, and it gets a lot worse. So the Samaritans claimed Jewishness when it was convenient. Like, they really enjoyed being descendants of Ephraim, descendants of Manasseh. They had this temple, so people had to come. Guess where the temple tax got paid? Of course, yeah, at the temple on Mount Gerizim. So it benefits them However, they don't so much like what the Jews are doing, and so while they're claiming Jewishness, they're saying that the Jews are like acting completely inappropriately. And so when Nehemiah comes back and starts trying to rebuild the wall around Jerusalem, the people who were mocking them, the people who were working against them, those were Samaritans. And so as the Jews are trying to reestablish their worship, it's the Samaritans who are actively fighting against them at that point. Additionally, during Seleucid King Antiochus's religious persecution of the Jewish people, the Samaritans allied with the pagans. They're like, yeah, great, we're with the pagans. And you actually see that played out in the book of Maccabees, which we'll look at in a moment. But here's another example. Josephus talked about this relationship, and it said, but when the Samaritans saw that the Jews were under affliction, they no longer confessed that they were kin to them, nor that the temple on Mount Gerizim was built in imitation of that in Jerusalem, but said that they were foreigners and aliens from the Jewish nation. They also desired that Antiochus would give them leave to dedicate the temple that they had on Mount Gerizim to Jupiter the Greek, and to call it the Temple of Jupiter Hellenis, and this was granted to them. Now, this was the request of the Samaritans, who said that they were Sidonians and not Jews, in order to avoid the calamities which the Jews suffered at that time. And they also requested that the temple on Mount Gerizim might be called the Temple of Jupiter. So you've got these folks who are like, we're the real Jews, you're not Jews. Wait, the Romans don't like Jews? We're totally not Jews, we're Sidonians. And by the way, we've got a temple, and we love our temple. People pay tax at the temple. This is the true place to work. It's totally not a Jewish temple. It's actually a temple to Jupiter because we don't want to get in any trouble. And so you've got the Jews in Jerusalem going, guys, what gives? Like, are you Jews? Are you not Jews? Are you like the... In the, I dropped the quote, in 2nd Maccabees chapter 6, it talks about how not only did the Samaritans convince the Romans to treat the temple in Jerusalem as a temple of Zeus, it also laid out that they themselves were calling their own temple a temple of Zeus. And so it's like, yeah, for the Romans, we're Roman. For everybody else, we're Jewish. We're totally the chosen race, even though we're mixed. And so there was actually quite a lot for them to bicker about, not enjoy one another over. And so this went exactly where you'd expect with respect to Jews killed Samaritans, Samaritans killed Jews, and it just went worse from there. And so, yeah, they didn't like each other whatsoever. And so, Jesus lands in Samaria at Shechem with Sychar. And Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, being wearied from his journey, by the way, fully man, wearied from his journey, was sitting thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour, so roughly noon. And there came a woman of Samaria to draw water. And Jesus said, "Give me a drink." For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. So Jesus, traveling, would have had some sort of water skin to lower down into the well. The guess is that his disciples just happened to have it with them because they went to go get the food. And so here he is with this woman at the well. And let's go on a little tangent to talk about why this is an awkward encounter. So it turns out wells are just fantastic places to meet chicks. So for one, this is where Rachel and Jacob first met, and right there at the well, you've got Jacob kissing Rachel because he's so excited about what's going on in the moment. Clearly not a historically accurate picture, but darn funny. So also, this is where Isaac's servant met Rebecca. And so this is a great place to meet ladies. You would think from just two stories it would not make its way into tradition, but it happens to be two very important stories to both Samaritans and to Jews, and it had made its way into tradition that a single man would not be speaking to a single woman at a well, because there was a sort of stigma with such a thing. And so here we've got Jesus, single man, talking to this woman at the well, and we're trying to decide swipe right, swipe left. Not sure which way we're going to go here. And she says to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask me for a drink, since I am a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." And I want to clear this up just a little bit. So, number one, this have no dealings with the Samaritans, it's not quite right. The have no dealings with is to use together with. And in this particular context, she's going to lower her pot down into the well. It's implied what the use together with is. We're not going to use this pot together with, which is why the NIV translates it better, I think, with or do not use dishes Samaritans have used. They don't share dishes. And it should be obvious because the Samaritans are mixed. They have Gentile. They're observing different food laws. And so, this is not kosher. That is clearly an impure pot that is going to get lowered down into the well. Of course, Jesus could not possibly drink from an unclean vessel because he'll become unclean himself, which is a little ironic when you consider that Jesus, in touching a leper, cleanses them. He's not worried about becoming unclean because that which he comes into contact with becomes clean. It's a pretty cool setup. But the real issue here is purity. She's like, "You're a Jew. You can't possibly touch this dish. That would be terrible. You will then be unclean." And while we're on unclean, we've talked about why a woman at the well would not be somebody that he would be talking to. And we've talked about why Samaritan at the well he would not be talking to. Let's talk about why a Samaritan woman he would not be talking to. And this comes from Mishnah Nida, just straight from the Talmud, where it says, "The daughters of the Samaritans are deemed menstruants from their cradle, and the Samaritans impart uncleanness by lying with them because they observe the laws of menstruation according to their own interpretation." They are menstruants from the cradle. So every Samaritan woman, unclean, according to tradition at this point, all the time. Unclean all the time. And Jesus says, unclean Samaritan woman, please give me a drink. And this is why it's such a big deal. Okay, we're going to put a pin in that one. We're going to go look at the conversation with Nicodemus for a hot second, and then we're going to come back. With Nicodemus, they had a little bit of beginning dialogue, and then Jesus went straight to the heart in a way that just seemed completely non sequitur. If you remember, Nicodemus said, hey, we know you're a teacher, and Jesus says, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. You're like, where in the world did that come from? So he's like, look, let's not worry about just witty banter. Let's not worry about keeping this on topic. Let's get to the point that matters. And he does it in a way where born again has some ambiguity. Is it born again or is it born from above? So there's sort of an earthly interpretation and there's a heavenly interpretation of this. And then Nicodemus decided, oh, of course he means born again. So he went straight to tradition. And he's thinking in his head, well, okay, I've been bar mitzvahed and I'm married and I've been ordained to I've been born again so many times. And in fact, I've been born again all the times that I possibly can. And then Jesus says, no, that's not what I'm talking about whatsoever. I don't care about tradition. Let's talk about what matters, which is spiritual stuff. So unless one is born of water and the Spirit, so he clarifies. And where Nicodemus lands is, oh my goodness, how can this be? And he's not asking, how can this be? He's saying, I've done everything. I'm awesome. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. Like I should be in at this point. And so Jesus sort of plants a seed and sends Nicodemus on his way because Nicodemus is not open at this point in time. Okay, let's go back to this woman. So Jesus completely ignores her question. She's like, how can you're a Jew, well, I'm a Samaritan. Why in the world are you asking me this? And Jesus says, straight to the heart. If you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. So here he comes right again, straight to the heart. Let's not worry about what the conversation's about. And he does it in a way that's ambiguous. So this living water can mean running water, like a spring. It's also used figuratively of the Holy Spirit. So we've got another situation. She can choose to take this as earthly. She can choose to take it as heavenly. And just like Nicodemus, she goes straight to the earthly and says, Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? You are not greater than our father Jacob, are you, who gave us the well and drank of it himself and his sons and his cattle? So she's going straight for tradition. She's like, you're speaking about literal water. Jacob gave us this well. It's been here for ages. It continues to flow with water. How can you possibly say that you're better than this? Additionally, by the way that the Greek sentence is constructed, she expects to hear the answer no. So this, you are not greater than our father Jacob, are you? This assumes the answer coming back is going to be, no, I don't. She's incredulous. And Jesus corrects her thinking, just like he corrected Nicodemus's thinking. Nicodemus went straight to tradition. Jesus said no. She's going straight to tradition, and Jesus answered and said, everyone who drinks of this water will thirst again. But whoever drinks of the water that I give him shall never thirst, but the water that I will give him will become in him a well of water springing up to eternal life. So again, he just with her, same that he did with Nicodemus, he's like, no, don't think about the earthly, think about the heavenly. And this should sound familiar. So I put a few passages together. So how precious is your loving kindness, O God, and the children of men take refuge in the shadow of your wings. They drink their fill of the abundance of your house, and you give them to drink of the river of your delights. For with you is the fountain of life. In your light, we see light. In Jeremiah 17, talks about those who have forsaken the fountain of living water, even the Lord. So this fountain of living water, clear reference to God. And in Isaiah, it goes a step further and uses this running water, this living water, this as springs of salvation. And so you get Holy Spirit together with salvation. And then one last place that we'll look at, Jeremiah 2, Israel has turned to other gods. They've turned to tradition in their own way. And they be appalled, O heavens, at this, and shudder, be very desolate, declares the Lord. For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, to hew for themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. And so you get this contrast between God, a fountain of living waters, water that is flowing, water that can be used for purification, a constant dynamic stream, and hewn cisterns that are broken, that can only hold stagnant water poorly. So they've exchanged dependence on God, reliance on him, and all the dynamic life that comes from that for just gross, stagnant, no. Yeah. Which led me to question, we knowing so much better would never give up a dynamic life of dependence on God for a stagnant life built on something else, right? We wouldn't do that. Just interesting note. Anyway, back to our story. She comes back around after hearing this clarification. Nicodemus, after hearing the clarification, went, "How could it be?" And it was clear he was closed. But our woman at the well comes back and she says, "Sir, give me this water so I will not be thirsty or come all the way here to draw." So she's going to call him a lot better than sir here in the not too distant future. But here she calls him sir. And I think that the situation is this, that he has just claimed that he's got living water, that he doesn't have to expend any effort to go get it, and that somebody who drinks from that will never thirst again, making him vastly superior to Jacob. That's one heck of a claim. So he's either far better than Jacob, or he's a complete charlatan. And I think when she addresses him as sir, when she's going to address him as so much more later, she's not sure, but maybe he's a charlatan. But her answer, unlike Nicodemus's, is prove it. Basically, put up or shut up. And Jesus is like, I can work with that.
Yeah.
So, a few observations. We have Nicodemus and we have this woman at the well. So, Nicodemus is an Orthodox male Jewish Pharisee aristocrat. Like, this dude's elite. The woman at the well is untrained Samaritan female peasant who has made a mess of her life up to this point. And Jesus speaks to them exactly the same. Exactly the same. See, they have questions and he sidesteps them to go straight for their hearts. And for whatever reason, he chooses with both of them to use an ambiguous statement. Could be taken as earthly, could be taken as heavenly. So in both cases, they go for tradition. They go for what is known. They choose the earthly interpretation. And Jesus ends up clarifying and saying, no, that's not what I mean. I mean the heavenly interpretation of that. And in both cases, he offers them life. And Nicodemus says, I can't go there. I just can't go there. And the woman at the well says, prove it.
Oh, wow.
To be continued.
Well,
Shall we worship?
all right.
Nice cliffhanger.